Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back for our weekly chat with Jason Mackey, Post-Gazette sports columnist. A lot to get into this week, Jason. Kenny Pickett is in the Super Bowl. He was the guy the Steelers drafted to be their franchise QB literally 3 years ago. So I feel like we should spend at least a little time talking about what happened there and kind of reevaluating it in terms of the 2024 season, how things shook out with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. We'll also talk a little bit about this flap with Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson not changing plays at the line of scrimmage as reported by our own Jerry Dulac. And then we might get into Jason's interview with Cordell Stewart on the Steelers front. Later, we're going to talk about the Penguins' big trade, Pitt basketball in seemingly another funk, March Madness hopes somewhat in doubt, and then we're going to wrap up the show talking Pirates. Tommy Pham signing with them for 1 year, $4 million. Get Jason's opinion on that. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. We have a lot to get to, so I'm gonna try to be a little concise this week.
Yeah, let's do
I'll
that.
try. I don't know if I'm gonna do it, but I'll try. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to do this ad read here for our friends at Edgar Snyder and Associates, who brought you the show today. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Jason, I enjoy doing that read because I've been watching it on TV my whole life.
Same. And now I used to do it on First 10, so I'm like sort of reading along with you, which I maybe shouldn't do. But anyway.
Yeah, so it's great to have them on board. Jason, let's get into it with the Kenny Pickett situation. He's been speaking, about how things ended with the Steelers at the Super Bowl this week during the media availabilities. Gotten some questions. I think he handled things pretty diplomatically. Says he wishes things had ended differently. Thankful for the experience and what he learned here. Do you think the Steelers wish things ended differently, having now seen Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, or do you still look at the way things shook out with Kenny Pickett as the right move in hindsight?
I think I look at it as the right move in hindsight, Adam. And the only possibility, and why I say I think, is because I think there's a piece of context with Kenny that we don't necessarily know. I want to be in the room for those conversations and hear how it went with Omar Khan after them signing Russell Wilson. I don't think the Steelers did anything wrong bringing in Russell Wilson. I don't think Kenny Pickett should have had any claim laid to the starting job, regardless of what happened with his ankle, surgery, coming back, whatever. What I want to know, though, was how those conversations went, what Kenny said, how it was received, what the tone was. And I realize those of us on the outside, we're never going to get that, right? Like, that's just team stuff. Now, if he was genuinely angry and threw a fit and was insulting and to the point where you say, you know what, I can't work with this, I don't want this on my team, then I think the Steelers made the right move, because I don't want that sort of attitude. I don't care who you are. I wouldn't tolerate it. So I wouldn't have any issue with them trading Kenny Pickett. Now, if they overreacted, if this was some sort of secret thing behind Kenny Pickett's back and he really got a raw deal, them bringing Russell Wilson in here, I don't know. But from what we know on the outside, I don't really have any issue with it. Like, it sounds like the guy was not terribly happy with the veteran quarterback being brought in. He should have been okay with it. He didn't play well enough to stave off that situation. In my mind, he could have really learned something from it, a la Justin Fields this season. And I was just asked a question in my mailbag about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Did the Steelers do anything wrong with the process there? I don't think so. I don't have any issue bringing in a 9-time Pro Bowler or a first-round pick with a lot of pedigree and trying to work with them. I think some of the execution was bad, but I don't have any problem bringing those guys in.
Well, and I think they were upgrades, Jason. At the end of the day, both of them played better than what we saw from Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and that was the point, right? As you bring two guys in and you figure out who you can chart a path forward with. We don't have the information yet on which one that is. We think they might be leaning toward Justin Fields, but that was the idea, and I think it worked out. And I think you're in a better situation at quarterback today, regardless of which direction you go, than you were a year ago. And that's really all it comes down to for me. Would you have liked to have Kenny Pickett on the roster? Maybe still, if you could accommodate it, sure. But
Adam, let me just counter opinion here. Would anybody be talking about this stuff right now if Kenny Pickett wasn't in the Super Bowl?
No,
would this be a conversation? No, it wouldn't. So, like, is it that big a deal? I don't think so. And I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying that to like the general discussion around Kenny Pickett, or like having to have revisionist history that the Steelers screwed something up so badly. Like,
well,
if the Eagles had lost, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Well, yeah, and I think part of the reason we are talking about it is that Kenny Pickett still has a devoted following of people in this town. It's almost militant. You as soon as he was in the Super Bowl, you were seeing people shame people for their opinions about Kenny Pickett, how he was treated on the way out of town. Why do you think there is such a fanatical base of support? Is it just Pitt fans who care more about Pitt football than they do about the Steelers? And listen, I care more about college football than I do about the NFL. So like, I totally understand, that frame of reference, and don't necessarily blame people who think of Kenny Pickett not as the guy who flamed out as the Steelers quarterback, but the guy who led Pitt to the ACC championship in one of their best seasons in 40 years. Is it that simple, or are there just some people who, didn't like Justin Fields or Russell Wilson for whatever reason?
I think it's exactly in the word that you used, Adam, fanatical. I give up in trying to understand this stuff, man. Like, yesterday or 2 days ago, I was getting hammered on Twitter for being too critical of the Pirates and not seeing their current plan. Like, what? If anything, that proved to me that literally anybody can say anything to you at any time and have any opinion. And maybe I should have anticipated that. But yeah, I mean, people are going to back Kenny Pickett. Maybe it's because, I don't know, they thought that was the world's greatest draft pick when the Steelers made it. Maybe they're related to him. I don't know. Maybe they knew him growing up. Maybe it's a Pitt thing. But there's always going to be people backing any ridiculous storyline. And that's what it is to me. Like, I don't understand how you can look at Kenny Pickett objectively, take everything else out. Just look at the numbers. Look at how he played football. Is that well enough that the guy shouldn't have to compete for his job? I mean, give me a break. We benched Justin Fields with a 94 passer rating and a 4-2 record. I don't have any issue with that. I'm just saying that Kenny Pickett was a long way from that level of performance.
Yeah, I agree. But it is, I think a lot of this conversation is driven by a relatively vocal but small group of people.
Sure.
And that is part of why we were talking about Kenny Pickett, not just because he's in the Super Bowl. One thing he did mention, he was asked about the culture of the Eagles, and, implicitly being asked to compare. I don't think he meant to. I don't think you're put in a situation where wherever you say about the team that you're on comes off as a criticism of the team that you left. But I did find the way he talked about it a little bit interesting in the context of some other comments that we've heard. Kenny mentioned that he's noticed fewer distractions with the Eagles en route to the Super Bowl this season, how they just handle their business. And I wouldn't have perked my ears up as much if I hadn't heard Najee Harris late in the season say something similar to the effect of, the media, that the players were paying too close attention to the media late in the season, that was, Najee almost blamed that for the collapse. It was a little bit ridiculous, but, it was something that he said as well. Do you see the Steelers as having any kind of cultural problem with getting caught up in things that they shouldn't? How do you interpret that comment by Kenny Pickett? Was it subtle shade or anything like that?
No, I don't think it was subtle shade, but I think it's true. And I think that's why the Steelers are sitting at home reevaluating what they're doing, and the Eagles are still playing. Like, good teams find a way to fight through that stuff, right? Like, there's always going to be media distractions, stuff that is tangential or not even the least bit related to what you're doing. And good teams can get out of the way of that. I look at Najee Harris, and I mean, hey, I appreciate Najee Harris being honest. I think us in the media too often will criticize players or something for giving an honest answer. Like, that's what you're looking for. Okay, they were affected by it. I mean, they're human beings. They're allowed. But I think that's why you see a field of teams whittled down to one, and the Eagles have done a better job of that. Now, organizationally, Adam, do I think the Steelers are too affected by outside opinion? No. I mean, I think it's the exact opposite. I feel like Art Rooney II, Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, whatever, they couldn't care less about what the public discourse is of their team. And it's almost to their detriment. Like, they would benefit by listening to what people are saying or how things are evolving around them. No, players, do they care too much what people are saying? Do they, like a George Pickens and Najee Harris? I think those guys do care about outside opinion to a degree, at least when it's critical of them, and I don't think they should. Why Why should George Pickens care what I write or what I tweet or whatever? And you see things like George Pickens commenting it's to somebody on social media or reacting to something. Like, that's not, no, those people aren't worth your time. I mean, you and I fight minor battles of that on Twitter. They fight major battles of it. Like, your goal should be oriented towards something. And I think the Steelers do have room to grow in that area.
Last thing on Kenny Pickett, Jason. If he has to play in this Super Bowl against Kansas City, do the Eagles have any chance?
No.
Okay.
I don't. No offense to Kenny. I think something will have gone horribly wrong. At that point, you're going to put, at least I would, every player in the box to stop Saquon Barkley, or not everyone. It's hyperbole, but you're going to dare Kenny Pickett to beat you with his arm, and I just don't think he can against Kansas City secondary.
Yeah, I agree. But it'll be interesting to see if that plays out at all. Jason, did you have any thoughts on this Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson situation? If you're not familiar, for the viewers and listeners, our own Jerry Dulac reported this week that Arthur Smith more or less removed Russell Wilson's ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage. There's been some other reports of friction between those two men in other locations, but that was our reporting on the situation. How do you interpret that? Does the Steelers coaching staff have some level of a control problem? Because this was something we talked about a lot during the Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky era, was that the play calling was pretty rigid, and granted that was under another offensive coordinator. So on some level, do you wonder that this is a Mike Tomlin thing? Yeah,
I do. I think that, it points to the top, right? Like, Mike Tomlin has the ability to change anything like that. If Mike Tomlin wants to empower his quarterback, you sit the two men down in a room and say, look, Russ has, final say-so in here. He's the quarterback on the field. He's done this for a long, long time. He understands running defenses. Arthur, I don't care if you don't like it or not. This is the way we're proceeding. I'm the head coach. Mike Tomlin didn't do that. It's on him. Yes, does Arthur Smith shoulder some blame here? Absolutely. Why you bring in a 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback, now 10, Super Bowl winning quarterback, and you could say a lot of things about Russell Wilson. He doesn't throw over the middle. He doesn't move as well as he used to, whatever. One thing you're not going to come up with, Adam, is that the guy doesn't understand football. He knows what he's doing. If you're going to bring a guy like that in here, why do you not give him carte blanche to change plays? And it's the same thing that happened with Ben Roethlisberger. So yes, there are common links here that point to Mike Tomlin. I think it's horrendous. I think it's a terrible look. I'm fascinated by where the story came from, whether it's Russell Wilson's camp, what the fallout from it is. If I'm Russell Wilson, do I want to come back here? Even if I'm the Steelers, I don't know what they think about it. If you're Mike Tomlin, if you're Arthur Smith, do you want somebody who went directly against your wishes? I don't have any issue with what Russell Wilson did, believe me, but if they're trying to play this buttoned up style that doesn't have a lot of audibles at the line, and Russell Wilson said the heck with it, man, it just causes a lot of problems. It's great fodder. I think it's a terrible look for the organization. I think it's a terrible look for Tomlin. It makes me rethink Russell Wilson. Like, what version of Russell Wilson were we looking at, Adam? Were we looking at over the final 5 games, this guy that was, essentially neutered? He wasn't able to do what he needs to do to get the ball down the field. I don't know the answer to that question, but it makes me reconsider a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ben Roethlisberger, and to me that was the biggest difference when you went to the younger quarterbacks, and something that I didn't appreciate until Ben Roethlisberger was gone. Because obviously there were a lot of analytics late in Ben Roethlisberger's career that were saying he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And my opinion was, well, as long as that's true, if you get an even average quarterback in here, it can be an upgrade on Ben Roethlisberger. But I think what you saw was these younger quarterbacks, especially coming out of college, where the systems are simplified and they are rigid. They don't necessarily know where the ball needs to go. And Ben Roethlisberger just knew that. And I think Russell Wilson would have fallen in the same camp. And I am surprised for the same reasons you are, that he wasn't given more freedom to bring that veteran savvy into that huddle. If you wanted someone you could control, then sign a younger player. Or just stick with Justin Fields. That was
why, Adam. Why? Look at today's NFL and how much things change and reading defenses. It's never been more complex. Why wouldn't you want that? Like, that's saying we purposely don't want to do what we think works, because it scares us or because we don't have control. That's a cultural problem. That's an ego problem with the coaching staff. I know you're not arguing for it. That's just what I think about.
No, it is, and especially when, listen, I mean, the body of work from anyone that they've had, as offensive coordinator in this last handful of years has not been phenomenal, if we're being honest. Like, yes, Arthur Smith has had some success, but he's not like, a legend of the game or anything. I mean, it should be more collaborative of a process. Jason, I know you talked to Cordell Stewart this week for a post on the website. Anything interesting from that you'd like to highlight or tease so that folks can check that out?
Yeah, a lot. Really good conversation with Cordell. Kind of came out of the blue. I've been trying to track him down for a little while to just talk about the evolution of mobile quarterbacks and sort of reflect a little bit on his legacy. I've long thought that Cordell was just ahead of his time. He was playing a style of quarterback that, and he explained this to me in our conversation, that nobody was ready for. And I believe that was a direct quote. And so I wanted to know how that made Cordell feel now. Like when he sees all these guys running around and making plays, that's a lot of what he was doing. And imagine Cordell with, I don't know, Todd Monken or something right now who's coordinating the Baltimore offense and allowing Lamar Jackson to do what he does. Like, I think Cordell would be a vastly different quarterback. I think he'd probably be a Pro Bowler. So we talked about that. We talked about, I don't think you can extract the idea of race from all of this. And so I asked Cordell, how much do you involve race in any of this or think it was chalked up to race? And I mean, he even wrote in a Players Tribune article a couple of years ago about receiving racist taunts and that sort of thing. And I mean, he shot it down, said he doesn't want to go there. He just thinks that, no matter the color of a quarterback's skin, like they weren't ready for it back then. And even now you have white guys running around making plays and it's just a completely different style of quarterback, but he's encouraged to see it. He loves seeing it. He thinks it's something the organization should embrace, having a small part in this history. So I went over all of that. Great conversation with Cordell Stewart. I think it'll go live on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. It will be in Sunday's paper, either A1 or Sports. But it's good to catch up with Cordell. I'd never talked to him before, and what a wonderful man and an excellent conversation we had.
For sure. So check that out, everyone, on postgazette.com, or if you still get the printed newspaper, be sure to check it out there. Jason, we're going to talk Penguins and Pitt here in the second segment. A lot to talk about there. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a message from Bradenton, Florida.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
We are back here. I'm Adam Bittner with Jason Mackey talking Penguins and Pitt. Jason, do you know what Floridian cuisine means? I've always meant to ask. Is it Floridian? Is that what it means?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's part Florida. So there's a lot of fish, and then it's part Caribbean. I go back and forth, Floridian or Floridian. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I mean, you're talking about fish, often blackened, grilled, something like that with, a lot of think of like a mango salsa, a lot of vegetables, fresh vegetables, that sort of thing. If you go and eat in Bradenton, and believe me, I could talk about this stuff for hours, Adam, pitchers and catchers report in 7 days, something like that. I'm going to be very sad until I get down there, but the food is awesome. Like everywhere you go, you're going to get some sort of starch, vegetable, an amazing kind of fish, the way it's cooked, the way it's prepared. You're like eating out on a beach, staring at water, man. It's just amazing.
I see. You learn something new on the podcast every day. Jason, we're going to talk baseball in a little bit, but let's get into the Penguins here. They make the big trade this week. Send Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor to Vancouver for a package. First of all, what did you think of the trade? And then I'm going to ask you some bigger picture questions off of that.
Yeah. So I liked it, Adam. I thought that Kyle Dubas, I almost said Jim Rutherford because I want to talk about Rutherford in 1 second, but I thought he did really well for himself. I thought he took advantage of Jim Rutherford knowing these players, and he's willing to give back a little bit more. And he really wants these guys coming in. They can help the Canucks, which they can. I mean, I think Drew O'Connor's a pretty good player. I think Marcus Pettersson's a really good player, as you can see by his contract extension. But what Kyle Dubas got back, I thought was very important for the Penguins' future. I mean, talk about a first-round pick. The Penguins can't accumulate enough of those. Melvin Fernstrom is actually a pretty good Swedish prospect. He's only 18, but playing in the top league over there. And, some good enough NHL players, right? Like Danton Heinen scored 17 and 18 goals in recent years. Vincent Descharnais can actually give them a physical presence, a third line pair. He's a right shot. So, I mean, they got enough back. I think it also sort of crystallized a little bit, at least for me, the direction that they're going. Like, this is going to be tough to redo it on the fly. They're not going to blow up anything. They're going to have to make some calculated decisions on guys whose contracts are coming up. And that's something I think, Adam, we're going to talk about in a little bit. But as far as the immediate return on this one, I thought Kyle Dubas, this is the definition of dealing from a strength and getting, addressing an area of need.
Yeah, Jason, I think there's a level of apathy from some people, though, unless you're talking about Sidney Crosby, of getting Malcolm, Chris Letang getting moved, that they feel like these moves don't really move the needle in the big picture or get them closer, to being a truly competitive hockey team again. Where do you land on that? If they trade a Rickard Rakell before the trade deadline or some of these other guys, do you think that makes a difference to this team's big picture, or does it really just come down to the 3 stars? Maybe Erik Karlsson, if you want to throw him in there as well.
No, I think Rakell could absolutely make a difference. And I don't know where I fall on that. He's the next place I shift my attention to, but I think a lot is incumbent on sort of what wiggle room Kyle Dubas can create for himself. Like, anybody looking for the Penguins to compete this season, like, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. But if you look at next year and beyond, I mean, the salary cap in the NHL is going up a pretty significant amount. The Penguins theoretically should be able to spend those dollars, at least next year. Like, not always, like, it's going up incrementally. I don't think they're always going to be able to spend to the cap, at least not until revenue matches that. But for now, they should be able to spend a little bit more. Now it becomes Kyle Dubas. What do you trade? What do you acquire in some of these trades? Like, you can make an argument to trade Rakell now. What I'm looking at is, can you attach Ryan Graves, Tristan Jarry, even Karlsson, something like that, to free up financial wiggle room and get younger players in here? Like, I'm not focused so much on 87, 71, and 58. And I understand fans externally are, because those are known commodities. They're Hall of Famers, they're Cup winners, all that stuff. But for the Penguins to make anything out of the tenure with these guys, what they have left, it has to be a better supporting cast. And yeah, a couple of years ago, they should have made some hard decisions and moved on. They haven't. Kyle Dubas is saddled with no movement clauses. There's only so much he can do. But the trades he does make, they need to be done in a strategic way. And Adam, they do matter. They matter about, the picks, the players, how immediately these guys can come in and impact the Penguins, as well as what they do in free agency. It's not a lot different than the Pirates. And if they screw this stuff up, they're just going to be spinning their wheels and missing the playoffs again. But there is an opportunity here again with the cap and some key moves they can make to recalibrate, retool, reload, whatever, and do it quickly.
Well, and I think with the contrast with the Pirates, Jason, is that you've got these 3 proven commodities that sell tickets that people are going to want to watch, hit milestones, things like that. But in the background, you're piling things up. I believe they have like the most draft picks in the
30 over the next 3 years.
Yeah, and so do you think that in the big picture that I think a lot of people have thought about the end of this era with Crosby, Malcolm, Letang as you're going to go into another 5-year period of just absolute tanking, getting high draft picks, and hoping lightning strikes again, like it has with Mario Lemieux and then with Sidney Crosby and those guys. To me, it feels a little more like there should be less of a disruption as you're moving between those eras. And if you draft and develop well, you're going to have the ability to have, maybe a deeper team that replaces this star-driven model that they've used.
Yeah, and I probably should have articulated my thoughts a little bit more with the Pirates, but that's exactly what I'm talking about, where you have the picks available. There's nothing stopping the Penguins from drafting a bunch of kids and developing them and getting them to come up to the NHL level and contribute. Like, if you look at goaltender, they have a few guys to succeed Tristan Jarry. I don't know who that's going to be, whether it's Blomqvist, Larson, Murashov, like guys who can come up here. If that happens, they're going to find success. A lot of first-round picks, a lot of second-round picks. Like, it's not only the volume of picks, it's also the quality of picks. And so if they hit on some of those guys, yeah, there shouldn't be dark times, in the post-Crosby, Malkin, Letang era. I'd also argue, Adam, this is something I've said for a while with these guys. They aren't necessarily the problem. Sid's not the problem. Like Letang, I mean, he's the same, boomer bust kind of player he's always been. Like, yeah, he's not a Norris Trophy fringe candidate, something like that. He's not going to quarterback your top power play or whatever, but he's still a very good, serviceable player. Erik Karlsson's been a halfway decent player. He's been, up and down, inconsistent, same thing he's been throughout his career. He doesn't justify a $10 million cap hit, but the issue has been a lack of supporting cast. The issue has been a lack of young players coming up here and playing on cheap contracts the way they had in 15, 16, 17. If they can get that and get that financial flexibility, sorry to use a bad term, I know I shouldn't in the city, but I mean, like that's what they need. They need guys playing on cheap contracts and redistribute that money elsewhere and make your team better.
Well, I think the important thing, Jason, is that on some level it is about the number of draft picks, because we know in the data that if you get drafted outside the top 15 in the NHL, your odds of being a productive player go way down. And so if you're banking anything on one individual pick or two individual first-round picks in the next handful of years, then I think, if things go badly, that's how you end up in this cycle of mediocrity forever. But if you get as many lottery tickets as you can, and you know what you're doing in terms of developing those guys, it only takes, and I think we saw this in the Stanley Cup years in 16 and 17, is it only takes a few guys hitting at the right time, Brian Rust, Jake Gensel, and that can really be all you need to have everything you need. Jason, also wanted to get your thoughts on Pitt basketball. Back-to-back losses, was a rough one against Virginia this past weekend. What are your thoughts on the Panthers? I think we talked on this show last week. We said 10 losses is the number to get into the NCAA tournament. If you have any less than that, you're probably in good shape. If you have any more than that, you're probably gonna have to make it up in the conference tournament on some level or another. What level of concern are you about this team?
It's not insignificant. I'll put it that way, Adam. I mean, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in that range. I think 9 or 10 alarm bells start going off, and I mean, they can still write this over the weekend. I don't think the season is completely lost, but you watched that game. I watched that game. That looked like a listless team, and I'm not sure where that came from. Like just the lack of effort, the lack of want to, getting beat in every category. I mean, the UVA was moving the ball at will, knocking down threes. This was a team with a losing record. Why was it 20-5, I think, assists, something like that? I forget the rebounding margin, but it was extremely significant. UVA just had its way with Pitt. And I really thought they adjusted some things. You saw in their 4-game losing streak, teams were kind of concentrating on stopping Ish Leggett and Jalen Lowe. And Pitt was able to, repurpose the basketball, move it around a little bit. Zach Austin stepped up in one game. Cam Corn was playing a role. Damian Dunn, same thing. And they just didn't have any of those answers against UVA. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty concerning spot if they don't bounce out of this quickly. I don't think they can afford many more opportunities like this. The context of how they played was not very good. I think Jeff Capel was right on the nose with some of his comments afterward. He took blame, which any coach should do, but said this is simply unacceptable to play this way. If that didn't serve as a wake-up call, I think this is probably a lost season.
Yeah, I think their ability to compete into March is going to be determined in the next week or two. If you drop 2 or 3 more, you pretty much have to win out to have any shot, and that is not a great place to be.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.